Welcome back to Restoring Sean. Today we are in episode 18, and that means it is finally time to get back to restoring things. Today we're going to be looking at the living room, what it took to revamp the space, bringing it into the modern day, and then all the whoopsies that were encountered along the way. If you're new to the channel, I post a new video every Wednesday morning where I do some sort of a sleepwalk into the work that went into restoring my second house, the ranch. All opinions are my own, never assume I have the correct answer, and did you know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist or paleontologist because of the movie and then later the book, Jurassic Park. And then I wanted to be a marine biologist because of the movie and later the book, Jaws. And then I wanted to be neither because I'm not especially good at math, and teachers sort of led me to believe that that part was absolutely, utterly, unequivocally paramount in that field. I could have been the next Alan Grant, and the world will never experience that now.
I mean, what's so wrong with kids?
Oh, Ellie, look, they're noisy, they're messy, they're expensive. Cheap. They smell.
I guess they'll experience part of it. Let's get started. Sidebar, I'm well aware that I'm starting to resemble a mountain man, and it's due to three things. One, I've been losing a lot of weight and I've been very distracted by my waistline shrinking. Two, I'm keeping a beard for the entire second season of this channel. And three, I have been absolutely killing myself working on this house for the last month. So this video is being filmed 2 days before it comes out, and that means goodbye grooming and hello from Monday morning at 5 a.m.
It's a quiet night. Okay.
When the move-in process had been largely completed and the furniture was in the rough spots that I had planned for it, I started putting thoughts into action of what the living room was actually going to look like. Seeing as the manor had been so subdued and dramatic in the colors downstairs with the black, white, and light gray, I wanted to up the ante a little bit more at the ranch. Overall, the house was going to be showcasing a variety of colors initially, from a great blue to this rich dark teal to a bright and fun peach color. But for the living room, I had my eye on something much more specific. They say green is a healing color, and I was very much in the mindset for healing. 6 months removed from a breakup, and then a couple weeks post getting my tonsil lanced open. I needed all the help that I could get. I went to my trusted Sherwin-Williams, of course, but I also branched out a little bit this time and went to Benjamin Moore as well because I just couldn't settle on the right green. You see, green can be all sorts of different shades, as you'll see in this photo of the swatches that I had collected. Some look more blue, some have a grayish tint, some are kind of minty, some are grassy. I wanted a very particular green with a yellow undertone, but still dark enough to perfectly match the green leather on the custom ottoman that I had ordered when I was living at the manor. I was also inspired by this image from Pinterest, which called out Benjamin Moore, but not the actual color that was used from Benjamin Moore. With some looking into,
After some extensive investigating,
I found the right color, and it was indeed Benjamin Moore's Windsor Green. However, because I am a Sherwin-Williams loyalist, I took the swatch to them to have them match the color because their paint was on sale and I trusted their paint, and the Benjamin Moore paint was not on sale and I couldn't afford it, and God help me if I wanted to save a buck now and then. This is Paolo, by the way. Funny enough, Sherwin-Williams didn't actually have to match the paint sample. They could pull the Benjamin Moore color in their system, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know that they could pull from other companies, and maybe they used to and maybe they can't now. I don't know, maybe whatever. They didn't need the swatch, so they filled the gallons for me. I got 2 gallons in the Emerald collection in a matte finish, and then I was off to the races. I took down the drapery rods that were left behind by the previous owners, and they were just cheap Walmart or Home Goods brand ones that were bowing downward. And of course, it goes without saying, if you shop at Walmart or Home Goods, I don't care. All I'm saying is that with some things, you get what you pay for. And I am very particular about my drapery rods, because to me, if you have a drapery rod that's up and it's bowing or it looks chintzy or cheap, it automatically like dulls down the effect that you're going for. I'm gonna put you down now, okay? After meticulously and painstakingly taping off all of the trim in this
massive
space. The very first brush strokes, I could tell right away I needed a primer behind the screen. And in hindsight, I should have stopped right in that moment because the store was 10 minutes away. I should have gone back to the store, purchased 2 gallons of tinted primer, and come back. They're only like 30 bucks. They were included in the promotion that the other paint was, so they probably would have been like $22 a gallon. But me being me, I figured that it was going to be fine after the customary 2 coats, so I just continued on. So it is day 1 of painting in the ranch. And I woke up a little earlier-ish on my day off to tape everything off. I don't tape the tops of the doors because I'm a rebel that way. But I have been cutting in trim for the last hour or so, and it's slow going, but it's the green that I wanted, but it looks a little jungle green right now, and I'm a little nervous, just like I was when I painted black at the manor, that I've made a critical error. So I'm gonna keep cutting trim. I was gonna do a time lapse of it, but I thought it'd be kind of boring because who cares about trim, but maybe I'll just do a little mini one and then we'll get some fanciness going when I get the roller out. So I'm afraid that this is gonna take more than 2 coats, which seems to be my luck when I paint green, because that's what happened in the guest room at the manor, and that was 4 coats. But the guy at Sherwin-Williams said I did not need a primer, and I'm gonna take him on his word for it, and we'll see how that goes. I've told you before that if you are painting green and the people at the store tell you you don't need a primer, do not listen to them. The employees at that Sherwin-Williams told me I did not need a tinted primer. This is the room that I learned that lesson in. I cannot stress enough, if you are cutting trim or doing whatever and you just need a paintbrush and not a roller, this handy paint pal is a lifesaver, because if you're increasing in your age like me, it really helps your wrist and your arm not to be holding the jug of paint. Once the trim was all cut in and I had filled my paint tray with Windsor green, it was time to get cracking on filming my very first time lapse ever of me painting a room. Because the ceiling had that popcorn texture, it was really difficult for me to cut the trim in along it, because some of the popcorn texture bits were like flush against the wall, so it looked like you had screwed up with your painting on it and like gotten it on the ceiling even though it wasn't. That was pretty tricky to cut that in. So the first coat's done, and I've got the second coat of edging done, trim, cutting, whatever you want to call it, I don't know. And I've got thoughts because I'm not thrilled with it. It's one of those things where you do something and you're so sure you're gonna love it, and then you don't. But I will say that the first coat of paint is never the best, and because right now it feels like the tiki room in here. And I thought I could get away with not painting any of the trim and doors, but that's not gonna happen now because it looks not how I want. So everything will get painted because that is how I do things, I guess. And I am about to start rolling the second coat. The other bad news was that this will indeed take 3 coats because you can still see through it. And I don't know what it is about green, and I don't know what it is about Sherwin-Williams saying you don't need to prime it, but we're all in this together. And like I've said before, I mess up a lot, so. As of today, we are 18 videos in. And if you've been with me from the beginning, that means you've watched about 8.5 hours worth of content. I think you know me well enough to know when I am upset and putting on a brave face. Okay, so second coat's on now, and I do feel better about it, so that's good. Never trust a first coat. I did just finish cutting in the third coat of trim-ish, whatever the word is for that. And I'm hoping that I can get away with 3 for the main walls. It might end up being 4. And then I need a fourth coat. In the end, I had to go out and purchase a total of 5 gallons of this green paint. Even with the 40% sale that it was on, it was about $70 a gallon. So if I had just purchased the 2 gallons of tinted primer like I should have, those would have cost me a combined $45, and it would have saved me $210 on the pretty paint. Here's the thing with green paint. I love it. I loved this Windsor green. I love the 5 shades that I've painted in this house, 6 if you include a spice rack in the kitchen. Theoretically, green works in any space, but here in the ranch, I discovered that green works best when it is contained. And in the ranch, I had used it in the entire open concept kitchen, living room, dining, and hallway. It was a lot to paint a single color. And not that it was too dark, because you know that the brightness or darkness of any paint doesn't affect me, but it just didn't look right in the space from day one. Beautiful color, but it just didn't look right. Before painting, I of course had taken off all of the electrical faceplates because I would be replacing all of the outlets and light switches throughout the entire house. So now what we're doing is replacing outlets. And reason being that most of the outlets are like this, where they're upside down and broken, and ivory, and I don't do ivory. So I've got those, and then I've also got switches. This is the least rusted of all the switches. So I'll get those replaced today too. And I already know that I bought some of the wrong outlets because I got 15 amp instead of 20 amp, which means I have to go to the store, and I'm not super thrilled about that. But it's my own fault because I can't read. I don't like old school light switches, like those ones. I like the flat rocker panels. And then similarly, I don't like the round outlets. I like rectangular ones. The faceplates for these types of switches and outlets are interchangeable. So you don't have to buy X amount of one type and then, you know, X amount of another. For my outlets and switches, I stick to the Leviton and Lutron brands. I want to say they're the same company, but I don't know what the actual company is that owns them. And I'm not gonna look it up. Okay, I looked it up. The company is Leviton. So in this area that you just saw, there were 2 panels of light switches. On the right, one powered the chandelier over the dining table, and then the other that was with it, it did nothing. It had power coming to it, but when you flipped it on and off, like it didn't power an outlet or anything. So I have no idea what it used to go to and why it was still there. The switch plate to the left was interesting because it powered the lights that were on the front porch and also the light that was above the front door when you walked in, which I had also replaced at some point with this like flat flush mount. But that switch plate would like bleed throughout the year. When I upgraded all of the light switches, the ones that were in that box were incredibly rusted and corroded, but the inside of the box was like sticky. And as time went on, that sticky substance would sort of ooze out from behind the faceplate. You could wipe it up, of course, with like a wet rag or a Clorox wipe, but it had a consistency of like honey. It was like honey. I don't know how else to describe it. I painted over it once and it showed right through, so who the hell knows what the stuff was. But I do know that wasps lived in the light on the opposite side of the wall outside, and like I know that wasps don't make honey, but you tell me, if you know what that could have been oozing out of the wall over time, please put it in the comments below because I have no idea. With the painting in the living room done, I could turn toward decorating the space. And that was actually really exciting for me because it was time to start repurposing all the frames and decor and just things that I had collected while living in the manor, repurposing them in this new space. And because I'd never had a fireplace or subsequently a fireplace mantle to decorate, that was also exciting for me to tackle from a decorating perspective. I ended up using my 6 square frames that I had scored such a deal on like a year earlier, and then a couple of mirrored candle sconces that I got at a crazy clearance price. And then these things combined were able to visually raise the height of the space as much as possible, seeing as the ceilings were only 8 feet tall compared to the manor, which had 9-foot ceilings. That was one of my grievances about the ranch, was that it always felt like it was resting on you. Like, because the manor was, lofty, high ceilings, and then this house has really high ceilings as well. The ranch, it just felt oppressive in a way. To put a word on it, it just felt like you were entering this kind of bunker every time you went in. And, I know you guys know that I wasn't a huge fan of that house, and that was just another contributing factor to why I didn't like it. But I didn't really crack the code on mantle decorating until the spring of 2022, but we'll get there momentarily. Because I had netted a certain amount of money from selling the manor, I went shopping right away for a new sofa that was going to work in the space. And my old sofa, my big ass had broken it, so I wanted to wait until I was in this house to figure out what I truly wanted for the space. Rather than being a brand whore to Pottery Barn, and also because I knew what the shipping delays were like at that point in September of 2020, I was on the hunt for an in-stock item that could be delivered within, a couple weeks or a month. Because the living room was so long and the television could only exist on one wall, I wanted a sofa that was going to have a right arm chase on it. The way you figure out a chase on a sectional, as you're staring at it, is it on your right or on your left? It's not as you're sitting on it. So sitting on it, your left arm and legs are stretched out, but looking at it, it's on your right side. So it's a right arm. Just so you know, that's very important for you to know, except it's not. I ended up going to one of the large furniture stores in Minneapolis called Home, and I found this really great piece that instead of having a chase on the end, it kind of had this angled, just like big piece. It kind of would have looked like if there had been another extension on it, it would have been an L sectional with an angle there. I guess you'll see a picture in a minute, so it doesn't matter if I'm describing it this way. This was perfect though, because since it was just me in the house, I could cuddle up on this great big end of the sofa with the cats, and I could watch movies and whatnot without having to like crank my neck one way, and I could just be comfortable on it. And it was a bit more mid-century than I would typically lean toward, but it fits with the vibe of the house. It does not fit with the current vibe of my house, but that'll be addressed at a later point. The rug was also a new one, some clearance piece that I purchased at Pottery Barn, and that is still in my living room here, and I love that rug. That rug is an 8x10, just so you are in the loop. And then there was the new window hardware, which is difficult to see here, and it was oil rubbed bronze, which was continued throughout the entire house. A month after the sofa was delivered, we were into December, which means two things for me. One, it's cold outside because it's winter. Two, the furnace went out. This isn't a surprise because in the 3 houses that I lived in Minneapolis, the furnace went out in each of them in December.
You just keep on heating yourself up, my precious little Bioja. Then you can't even see it. Fuck.
Winter dragged on, and then it was spring. The giant tree in the neighbor's backyard blossomed to life, and it filled the big picture window in the living room every day with something just really pretty to look at. And I'd been busy over the winter in the rest of the house, working my way through it and around it, and that included painting all of the trim in pure white enamel paint by Sherwin-Williams, the same color trim I had painted in the manor. This would be the last time that I ever used that color, not for any nefarious reason, but I really learned that using such a bright white makes it really difficult to cover whatever you're trying to paint over. In this case, wood, painting over wood, because the tannins come through. So for example, I'll show you a photo of the ceiling in my kitchen in this house, and it looks white, doesn't it? This is egret white, but when you compare it to pure white, as in this photo, it almost looks like it's gray. Using egret has been a miracle in terms of having the ability to hide things in just 2 coats and not the 3 or 4 that it would typically take with the pure white. As June dragged on, it was getting too hot to be working outside all the time, so I turned my focus to the makeover for the fireplace in the living room. It wasn't in the worst ever condition, but it wasn't great. And seeing as a new mantle was going to be built for it in the fall, I was ready to get cracking on the brick portion. And I had pulled the black and brass faceplate off, which was installed when they installed the fireplace insert. I don't know why they put this in, which happened in the early 2000s based on the date of the unit. And you could plug it in and it had like a blower that would blow the heat out. Behind it, you could see the original shape of the actual fireplace. So it was much larger, and I would have loved to remove that unit just to have much more of a grand fireplace experience, because you really couldn't fit much inside of that thing in terms of wood. It just wasn't in the cards for me at that house, because that was going to be probably opening up a can of worms, knowing that there were issues with the chimney anyway that I chose to ignore. I bought some white concrete primer and went to work with all the soot bleed through effect it had on the paint. I ended up applying 5 coats of this white to it. As I was painting it, I also wanted to figure out what I was going to be doing above the mantle. And while I've never been a fan of jumping on the like country chic bandwagon, apart from my bedroom when I was 17, I decided I was going to install shiplap. To get me used to the look, I painted the general size of it up on the wall. Isn't that mantle so stupid looking? You have to wonder what they were thinking when they built it. And maybe back in the day, in the 1970s, maybe there wasn't much mantle decorating. And because, at this point I'd worked at Pottery Barn for 9 years, so I knew that your mantle was this great opportunity to amp up your space with the decorating on it. So maybe that's why it bothered me so much. But the mantle that was there was only like 6 inches deep, and you couldn't fit anything on it. Brighter brickwork now brightening up the space and popping so nicely against that green wall, I started installing the shiplap. So there were 2 vertical posts that went all the way to the ceiling, and then those were going to be filled horizontally with the rest of the boards. And you'll notice in this picture that when it was done, there was like a weird gap at the bottom between the concrete and the bottom piece. And I left that open for the new mantle that was being built by my dad. It was gonna be, I think, 11 inches deep and maybe 10 inches tall, but then it extended like 6 inches further on the sides than the current brick piece did. Also, the shiplap at the bottom is cut at an angle because, surprise, the fireplace was leaning a bit and then the ceiling was leaning a bit, so I had to do some math to compensate for that. The math that prevented me from following my dreams of unearthing dinosaurs or being, eaten by a shark. Flashing forward a few months, my parents came out to celebrate Thanksgiving at the ranch. Because it was now 2021, this was our first holiday together since Christmas of 2019. Partly because we didn't want to risk them getting sick with COVID, but also because I was not able to leave the state due to protocols through work. Ask me how I feel about that in hindsight. So November and Thanksgiving and my parents also meant that finally the mantle was arriving. My dad built it out of old white oak pieces from inside one of the barns at their property. I wanted it fashioned in a way that it would essentially be a shell that could be attached to the 2x4s and support pieces we were gluing down. Those pieces were also being attached to the wall for extra stability, of course. It stayed clamped in place for 24 hours while the glue dried, and then it was ready to go. Finally, the scale of the whole thing felt proper, and it felt so cozy to have the real wood instead of laminate like the floors. And ignore the Christmas decorations. I couldn't show you the mantle in this incarnation without revealing those. You'll have to wait until December for how I do Christmas. Once Christmas had come and gone, in the first week of January, I dropped a massive mirror on my toes at Pottery Barn and broke 2 of them. I was laid up for a couple of days on painkillers that I had left over from my kidney stone surgeries the year before, which I didn't mention, but we'll mention that at the end of the season. And here Paolo is being my helpful nursemaid during it. Because I'd been laid up for a few days in the living room, it really just compounded on me how much I disliked the green in the living room. It was hard to decorate around the color. Christmas had looked utterly insane. It didn't feel right. It just didn't. Maybe it was the house style, maybe it was the shape of the room, I'm not sure. But if I was going to go lighter from the green, this also meant that I was going to have to change the fireplace and go darker because, coincidentally, I also did not like the white of the fireplace. So when you're not down with the brightest color, you might as well go with the darkest. After polyurethaning the mantle, I painted the brick of the fireplace and the shiplap with black magic paint in a matte finish by Sherwin-Williams, which was literally left over from painting it at the manor almost 3 years earlier. To contrast this, I painted over the green living room walls with Snowbound by Sherwin-Williams, which is a soft white that has this kind of touch of a creamy brownish gray in it. When combined with the black and the pure white trim, the dark frames, and just the beautiful mantle, you have this gorgeous moment with the fireplace. The metal face on the brick doesn't stick out anymore. It all feels large and dominant in the room, anchoring itself as like the focal point for the entire living space. And then a few weeks after this project wrapped up, I finally took the time to properly decorate the mantle in the way that it would exist until it was time for me to move out. I used my apothecary jars, of which you can never have too many. And side note, I had 2 really big ones, but one of them shattered in the move, so just down to the one. For some height and to break up 2 of the jars being the same, I added vintage books gifted to me by my grandfather. I filled the large jar with a few of them as well, and then surrounded it with faux succulents and some small vases from Pottery Barn. In one apothecary jar, I drilled a hole in the base to fit the power cord for my black salt lamp, which just fit like a glove inside of it. And then I finished it all off with some flameless candles and a framed photo of the cats, and this thing was now ready to roll. Tap dancing a full year to January of 2023, I had already made the decision that I was going to be selling the house, and it was time for that to happen. I was ready to put the ranch on the market and move back to Wisconsin. Unlike the original listing photos of the ranch, which were taken by the real estate agent and probably on his cell phone, if not like an old digital camera, the new ones were taken by a professional photographer, and they were just gorgeous. They showcased this house in a light that I had never captured with my own photos. It looked warm and interesting and inviting. And when you compared it to those original photos, it looked like a totally different space. And that, my friends, is the power of paint colors and a decent design aesthetic that came about from flip-flopping and not knowing what you wanted. The process of moving out was tedious and annoying, as evidenced by me being distracted while packing up clothes. The living room and kitchen were the staging area for so much of the packing, because I would bring things to the dining table and sofa so that I could sort through them, figure out what I wanted to move with and what was going to get donated or trashed, and then box it up and then move those boxes to the garage, which by the time move out day came, the garage was full to the ceiling, front to back, side to side with all of my stuff, because I figured that'd be easier to load the truck up with. But I moved along slowly, steadily, with purpose, until you come to this.
It's my last day living in Minnesota. Ask me how I'm sleeping.
I moved back to Wisconsin in mid-March 2023, and this photo was part of my last glance at the ranch. Probably 70% of my time in that house was spent in this giant room, and looking back at it now gives me a heart palpitation that I never have to live in that again. And that is all I have got for you today. Thank you so much for watching as we went through the two-toned calamity of the living room at the ranch. If you have questions or comments on anything you saw in the video today, please drop them in the comments below. And while you're at it, go ahead and click the like button because it helps me out. And then if you haven't already, click the subscribe button because it helps you out. That way you'll be reminded every Wednesday morning when a new video drops, like next week when we start the "What the hell are you even doing?" process in the kitchen of episode 19 of Restoring Sean. Until then, take care, and I will see you soon.